One meme I haven't really addressed kind of feels like it's already starting to peter out a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's kind of how it feels. That's this Yang Gang meme. Andrew Yang, the Democratic presidential hopeful, running for the Democratic presidential nomination. And he's had a lot of appeal. He's generated a lot of buzz. The first and most obvious thing about Andrew Yang is he's not one of us. Like, he doesn't look like one of us. He doesn't have one of our names. He isn't one of us. And so, that's a major thing and a glaring thing that sticks out right away. And I'm going to come back to that. But as far as his actual policies go, what is this Yang guy about? He's got three main policies and a bunch of smaller ones. And the main policies that he's famous for are, Medicare for all, sometimes called, universal health care or socialized medicine or single payer health care. That's basically what this is. It's a single payer health care scheme. And this isn't necessarily totally retarded. Like, there are some retarded implementations of this around the world, but the idea itself isn't totally retarded. I mean, there is an argument that, insurers are not incentivized to provide an optimal level of health care or provide it in the optimal ways. And there's a lot of inefficiencies that go along with the bureaucracy and the overhead and all the wrangling that happens between healthcare providers and insurers, which some people estimate is more costly than the healthcare itself. And so there are a lot of issues. This isn't necessarily, there's a lot of criticisms of socialized medicine or universal health care, but it's not totally retarded because the alternatives have a lot of issues too. And, his other thing is what he calls human-centered capitalism, which is basically like, a fundamentally market economy. I think he's for a fundamentally market economy, but addressing some obvious issues with capitalism, at least in the neoliberal form of capitalism. Some fairly obvious issues with, incentive problems and market failures and the provision of public goods and commonses and that sort of thing. And so that's what this human-centered capitalism is all about, or seems to be all about, is addressing some of those issues and addressing also the issue of inequality, expanding income inequality. And why is that an issue? Well, contrary to like hardline dogmatic libertarian free market types, we do want some inequality because we want to incentivize productive people to produce in proportion to their ability, which is unequal. So we want some inequality to incentivize people to produce. But the thing is, if there's too much inequality, then it leads to a variety of, social and political pathologies. And that could be anything from, increasing the appeal of redistributionist socialism to inspiring, risk-taking and violent behavior. If there's really steep inequality, a huge difference between, let's say rich and poor, then people are going to be incentivized to take large risks and desperate actions to try to climb that socioeconomic hierarchy in various ways, whether it's by resorting to crime or, gambling or other things that are tantamount to crime or gambling. And, a consequent breakdown in order and safety and trust and various other things that are, nice and important in various ways. So we want a certain amount of inequality to incentivize production, to the extent that people are able, which that extent is unequal, and so we need unequal rewards to incentivize, unequal production. But, too much inequality can be a disruptive thing, or it can lead to disruptive behaviors. So there's nothing wrong with that per se. Addressing obvious issues in, materialistic, consumeristic, neoliberal capitalism, or, addressing issues of inequality in maybe, let's say, a sane and reasonable way, without being, a retarded leftist about it. And it's not easy because these, there's a lot of ways you could try and attack these issues. It's not clear how many of them actually work or what consequences and side effects they always produce. It's not simple. It's not trivial. So, people who act like it's simple or trivial or they're easy solutions, retarded leftists are retarded. But this guy doesn't appear to be. He seems like he wants to address them in kind of a serious way. Now, the big thing with Yang is his UBI, Universal Basic Income, or Yang Bucks, as some people have called them. And this idea is to replace means-tested welfare, like stuff where you have to make less than a certain amount to qualify for the program, with just a check. Cut everybody a check every month for $1,000, say, just to throw out a round number. And that's it. You get your $1,000 check a month, whether you make no money, whether you're unemployed, or whether you're making $1 million a year. And everybody just gets a check. You can take all of those social workers and caseworkers and welfare offices and, fire all those people and just replace them with some guy in a basement and with a printer printing out checks. And you just print one check for everybody every month and send them off. That's all there is to it. And, or do the electronic equivalent, which is even simpler. And there are some advantages to this system. First of all, less overhead. Second of all, there is not ever a negative incentive to improving your own situation. With a lot of these means-tested programs, like you're up here at a certain level on the programs, and then if you get a job and start making some income, you're eligible for less programs, so your net income may actually go down from getting a job. Your total income may actually go down from that. And so with the UBI, you wouldn't have that phenomenon. You wouldn't disincentivize people to improve their own situation because you can, you get your Yang Bucks or your UBI whether you work or don't work. So, it's always in your interest to get a job and start paying taxes and making more income. And so, the issue with this is the math just doesn't seem to work out right now. The U.S. spends almost $1 trillion on welfare. That's between state and federal governments. There's an additional $1.3 trillion on Medicare and Social Security, but I don't think this is proposed to replace those. So it's just about, a little less than $1 trillion is what it's proposing to replace. And cutting everybody a check for $1,000 a month would cost about $3 trillion, or just over $3 trillion. So there's a shortfall in there of something like $2 trillion that would need to be made up with increased government revenues or deficit spending. So it's not clear where this $2 trillion is going to come from. A little bit of back of the envelope calculations. It seems there's about $17.5 trillion in personal income in the United States. So if you had a 33% flat tax rate with no deductions and no exceptions or write-offs, everybody pays 33%, then that could potentially raise the $3.6 trillion in existing revenues, tax revenues, plus the $2 trillion extra you would need to pay for this UBI. So that would be a massive increase in government spending and taxes. But how it would work out is basically, you'd have a 33% flat tax rate, no real deductions or exceptions or write-offs. And, if you're making less than, say, $36,000 a year, you're effectively breaking even because what you're paying in taxes is exactly the same as what you're getting every month in check form from the government. So there's essentially a zero effective tax rate if you're making $36,000. If you're making more than $36,000, you're going to be a net taxpayer, and if you're making less than $36,000, you're going to be a net, tax recipient under this this model. So it would basically be like a progressive tax rate, except that you're guaranteed a minimum income, say, of $1,000 a month, which is the basic amount of your stipend. Now the real problem with this is that increasing the incomes of the lower level consumers, who do make up, in this case, about 45% of the population. That's the people making less than $36,000 a year. 45% of the working population, something like that. Increasing the incomes of like the bottom half of consumers, say, is going to increase demand for the kinds of things that everybody, including them, consumes. And so a lot of that $1,000 a month is going to be eaten up by inflation, because these lower level consumers are going to have more money chasing a lot of the same things. Obviously, production of some things can increase, and so maybe there's a little bit of net gain, but not everything will increase, or not everything will increase by the same amount. And so a lot of that $1,000 will be eaten up by inflation, especially of, let's say, rent, because that's one of the less flexible supplies of available housing. And so you have all these kind of lower level people in the socioeconomic spectrum suddenly get a windfall of $1,000 a month, and rents are going to go up along with some other things. And so inflation is going to just eat up a lot of that $1,000, and we're also going to see a net increase in taxes and a net increase in the scale of government spending. It's not clear that there's any net benefit there. But these three main things, the Medicare for All, the human-centered capitalism, the UBI thing, they're not really retarded. I don't see them as being like solutions to pressing problems, or like not ready for prime time, or not that compelling, but they're not totally retarded. Yang doesn't seem totally retarded. He's not one of us, but it seems like he is scared of us in a way, a good way, not in the sense that normal leftists are scared of us and therefore want to exterminate us, but in the way that he wants to throw us some bones and like buy us off, and make sure him and his descendants don't end up in internment camps. And that's basically a positive thing. So even though he's not one of us, I think he has a basically sensible mindset. And but he does have some really dumb ideas, to be honest. He does. Like, some of his minor ideas are pretty dumb, or pretty destructive, or pretty costly. Like the whole thing about more voting rights for felons. Felons is just a synonym for Democrats. So this is another thing to entrench the power of the leftist progressive Democratic Party. Same thing with electoral college reform. Again, urbanite scum. Democrats, synonym for Democrats. He wants amnesty for illegals, which, again, Democrats. Transferring power to Democrats, political power. And not only that, but the thing about amnesties is the next amnesty cannot be the last amnesty. Only the last amnesty can be the last amnesty. The last amnesty can't be in the future, because that way it's just one after another after another. It's just it's a slippery slope from one amnesty to the next. So you can't be like, okay, after this one we're gonna stop. No, you just have to you have to go cold turkey on the amnesty. So the last one has to have been the last one, not the next one, not after this one. He wants to make Washington, D.C. a state. That's another way to increase the political power of Democrats. He does want to tighten gun control. He's not insane about this, but he wants to chip away at it. Don't like that. He wants to add a value-added tax. Not thrilled about that. I know, if it was like revenue neutral, if it's like, okay, we're going to take away income tax and do value-added tax, fine, maybe, because like a consumption tax is less destructive than an income tax, which is like a production tax, because you want to tax, what you want less of and not what you want more of. But he's all about the LGBTQ crap and the equal pay for equal work, and subsidizing single parents, which, again, Democrats. Subsidizing higher education. Again, Democrats. He's a Democrat through and through, so can't get excited about Yang. He has a few genuinely good ideas, like, sunset laws, a modest foreign policy. Gee, where have we heard that before? He's for nuclear power. That's a good thing. Like, it's the only way forward. It's the only, kind of clean, sustainable energy source that we have. But overall, he's got a lot more bad ideas. His main ideas, like his signature ideas, are not totally retarded, but not that compelling, or they're just not ready for, implementation. They're not a solution to, existing problems or pressing problems. To the extent that he offers hope, I think it's kind of a false hope. And we've had this before. Trump was kind of a false hope. He gave people a lot of energy. He gave people a lot of hope, but fundamentally it was a false hope. And a lot of us knew it was a false hope, like from the very beginning. We knew that the system was broken and there's not really much he can do to fix it. And, and we're enjoying what he's doing, some of it, not all of it. A lot of it's a big disappointment and a big letdown. Yang's going to be even more so, okay? Trump was never going to fix it. Yang is never going to fix it. We all know what it's going to take to fix it, and it doesn't involve democratic politics. And this is where, a lot of people get their hope, not from the false hope that Yang is peddling, that he's actually going to fix anything or make anything work better, but from the accelerationism, the idea that this is going to speed the decline. And I think this is motivated fundamentally by cowardice, because, we all know what it's going to take to solve these problems, to make everything better, to put everything right. Not everything, that's utopianism, but a lot of things. We all know what it's going to take, and nobody wants to do it. That's the issue. And the hope of accelerationism is, if things get bad enough, somebody else will do it for me, or at least help me do it, so that I don't have to do it. So accelerationism is fundamentally kind of motivated by cowardice. And whether you're putting any genuine hope in this Yang guy, or whether you're just an accelerationist who's hoping he'll make things worse, bad enough, quick enough that other people will step up and do the actual work that it's going to take, that's not, I think, a very creditable motivation or mindset, but I think that's what's motivating a lot of this. And the reality is, somebody's going to have to do something else that's not part of the electoral system, that's not part of democratic politics, because that's never going to fix it. We know what's going to fix it, and it isn't that. If you like the video, links below to support the channel, like, share, subscribe, and check out my merchandise as well.